Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Johnny Collette, the Deputy Director at the University of Kentucky's Human Development Institute, and we want to welcome you to the third of four in our series focused on delivering on the promise of employment first for students with significant disabilities. Whether you've been able to join us for all of the webinars to this point, or maybe today is your first opportunity to join, we're really glad that you're here and looking forward to a great day together. If you did miss either of the first two webinars, there will be a link in the chat box where you can access those recordings. We are particularly excited today to have the opportunity to talk about the importance of effectively engaging families in the career development process. You know, there is no more unique role than that of parents and families, which makes their voices critical in all matters related to their children. And we hope that becomes even more clear to all of us as a result of our time together today. So just a few things as we get started. While your microphones are muted at this point, we do encourage you to use the chat box and introduce yourself. And there's also a Q&A function that you will find there with specific questions that you may have for presenters, or you can also chat privately with someone who can help you with technical difficulties that you may be experiencing. Captioning is available. Also, CRC and ELA credits are available. We encourage you to complete the evaluation. You'll find a link to that a bit later in the chat box as well. And we will share a follow-up email from today's webinar that has a number of pieces of information that you may find helpful to you. And it will include ways that you can continue to participate in this series and register for the final webinar, which is 2 weeks from today, and also a live coaching call opportunity that you can register for. So be looking for those email reminders in the next day or so from us. There's also a link in the chat box that you can follow to download the presentation that you will be seeing here and interacting with here today. So we encourage you to do that, as well as the materials for webinar 3 that our partners at the YES Center will be referring to in just a few minutes. So thanks again for being here. And you'll see here that the purpose of this webinar series is really designed to support you from wherever you lead and wherever you serve, to support you in supporting children with disabilities, students with disabilities, and obtaining competitive integrated employment. So we understand that those who are closest to the students know their needs best. And we want to be a good support and partner to you in the work that you're already doing and leading every day. And it's been a pleasure for us to work, as it always is, with our partners at the Kentucky Department of Education and the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation and the National YES Center. And again, you'll hear from them just a bit in a few moments. So it is the policy of the Commonwealth of Kentucky that competitive integrated employment in the community is the first and preferred option for individuals with disabilities of working age who desire to become employed. So not only is that the policy of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, but it serves as the foundation for this entire series of webinars. And you know, this executive order was one incredibly important step toward realizing a truly inclusive workforce in Kentucky, to continuing to build our economy, and to make sure that no one gets left behind in those efforts, and that individuals with disabilities, the incredible contributions that we know they make to Kentucky's workforce every day, will be recognized and encouraged and expanded as days and years move forward. So we couldn't be more grateful for the governor's action and recognize it as a significant step forward to delivering on that promise for students with significant disabilities. You'll see here what has been our schedule for our webinar series, 4-part webinar series. We have had 2 of those and are engaging in the 3rd one today on February 17th. 2 weeks from today, we'll have our final webinar. And again, you'll receive some email follow-up with instructions about how to register for that webinar if you haven't already. And we certainly encourage you to do that if you have opportunity to do so. One of the things that's been really exciting about planning for this series and now implementing this series of webinars has been the opportunity for live coaching calls, where we can really dig a little bit deeper on the tools and processes that we hear about from our partners at the YES Center. You know, ask questions from them of that's informed by a lot of work across the country with a lot of different states and schools and districts and students and parents and families and educators. So it's really an incredibly cool opportunity to be able to do that. We had our first coaching call last Wednesday, and it was a great call. We had 6 local school districts represented. We had parents represented and also other partners. So I hope you'll consider registering, if you haven't already, for the next coaching call, which will be 1 week from today on February 23rd. So throughout this webinar series, we've had opportunity to hear from leaders from across the state on the importance of Kentucky's Employment First policy, and particularly as it relates to students with significant disabilities. In our first webinar, we heard from Dr. Kathy Shepard-Jones, who is the Executive Director of the Human Development Institute, and also from Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman. 2 weeks ago on our second webinar, we heard from Kentucky Education Commissioner Jason Glass. And today we have the pleasure of hearing from Cora McNabb, who is the Executive Director, the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation.
Hello, I'm Cora McNabb, Executive Director of the Kentucky Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. The purpose of vocational rehabilitation is to empower individuals with disabilities through ongoing services to maximize employment, achieve economic self-sufficiency and independence, and to contribute to society. We are pleased to partner with the University of Kentucky Human Development Institute and the Kentucky Department of Education in the effort aimed at delivering on the promise of employment first for students with significant disabilities. Vocational rehabilitation, the Department of Education, and the Human Development Institute have a rich history of partnership in supporting the transition of students with significant disabilities from high school to post-secondary success, including competitive integrated employment. One example of our successful partnership over many years is the Community Work Transition Program, which provides a positive beginning in the world of work for students with disabilities, with a primary focus on students with significant disabilities. Kentucky is an employment first state, which means that we believe all of our citizens, regardless of the level of their disability, should have meaningful opportunity to work alongside co-workers without disabilities, to earn minimum wage or higher, and have the same opportunities to grow and succeed throughout their careers. As a state, we are united in our commitment to competitive integrated employment, being the first and primary option for persons with disabilities. We know from experience and research that persons with disabilities can work successfully in the community and have a meaningful career. Kentucky Vocational Rehabilitation stands ready to assist you in your work to help students with significant disabilities obtain competitive integrated employment.
Well, thank you, Cora. Thank you for your time and that important message for us today. So I'm excited again to welcome our colleagues and partners from the Yes Center, Sean Roy and Dale Verstegen. The Yes Center is a national training and technical assistance center that supports states in their work to improve employment outcomes for youth and young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So Sean and Dale, grateful for your time. Looking forward to the presentation. And Dale, I think you're going to get us out of the gate here.
Yeah, thank you, Johnny. So really nice to have this opportunity to be with you all today and to get started on our third of the 4-part webinar series that we have put together for you. I've been asked to kind of just give you just a general introduction to kind of who we are and kind of how we got to working with University of Kentucky Development Institute. My colleague Sean Roy and I work for an organization called Transcend. They're based in Rockville, Maryland. It's a private not-for-profit organization that provides services in different parts of the country. We also provide training and technical assistance, which is what brings us to working with you all here today. And then we also have a third division, which is on research and development. And a lot of the strategies that you're going to be hearing about this afternoon are the same as what we use ourselves, and the same with some of the research that makes its way into some of the tools and strategies that we're sharing with you today. Transcend also partners with the TASH Association to provide technical assistance to what we call the PI grant states, which is partnerships in employment. And Kentucky is a recipient of those federal funds that work on systems change. And it's through their efforts to really move the needle on transition-related employment outcomes that has us working with you through the YES Center. YES Center stands for the Youth Employment Solutions Center. And it's our technical assistance center that supports both Kentucky and a number of other states that are going through these systems change efforts. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Sean Roy, and get started on the content for this webinar.
Perfect. Thank you, Dale. Everybody hear me okay? I'm assuming. Great to be here. Thank you, Johnny, and everybody there in Kentucky for having us. Again, as Dale said, my name is Sean Roy. I'm his colleague at Transcend. Also, we represent the Youth Employment Solutions Center, and in that, that's what we're doing here today, is providing some assistance to Kentucky. And this is second webinar that we've been involved in, third webinar in the series. And so thank you to everybody who's here. Welcome back to everybody who joined us the first couple times. The title, Delivering on the Promise of Employment First for Students with Significant Disabilities, I think is significant. I think that it guides what it is that we want to talk about. And I think it's appropriate to also add at the end of that, delivering on the promise of employment first for students with significant disabilities and their families. Johnny gave a really nice overview of the importance of families in the lives of young people with disabilities. And I've been a family advocate for the better part of 20 years, over 20 years. And I certainly know that families are anxious to have an expanded set of opportunities for their sons or daughters with significant disabilities. And the idea that their sons or daughters can be part of the workforce, the competitive workforce in the community, is something that most families wish for their son or daughter. It's just sometimes they need a little help seeing what that might look like. So today we want to recap what we did for webinar 2. Where did we leave off in this process? We want to talk a little bit about reimagining how we look at partnering with families so we can come at this from the right angle. You remember that we talked about the positive personal profile in webinar 1, and we're going to go back to the positive personal profile, but we're going to talk a bit about how do you use a family interview to populate the positive personal profile, and then using Venn diagrams to really help families see job matches. I want to talk a little bit about addressing the apprehension that some of your families may feel about exploring competitive employment. And certainly want to address then taking the discovery and assessment concepts that we've talked about and bridging those into a job development plan or an action plan that says, okay, we've learned a lot about this student. What do we do now to help them secure a work experience or a competitive job? The chat box is there. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat box. I've asked, Johnny to take a kind of monitor it a little bit. I'll look at it while Dale is talking. He'll do the same for us, but feel free to throw in anything in the chat box that you would like, any comments on what we say or any questions about what's going on. So where did we leave off? In webinar number 2, we really stressed the fact that employment is for everyone. We believe that everybody has skills that, if identified and nurtured and put in the right environment, would allow people to be good employees. And so it's important. That's kind of the basis of employment first, is this presumption of employability and not the presumption of incompetence. We talked about the importance of individualized work experiences and how that really guides everything that we do, because we understand that young people that get quality work experiences and paid jobs in the high school years tend to have better employment outcomes when they're adults. So that's a great thing for us to focus on, is helping kids get work experiences. The positive personal profile drives that process, and the positive personal profile is a living document. It's not something that you just hand to somebody and say, hey, here you go. It's something that is contributed to by multiple people who know the student, to be able to build a really nice picture of what that student's strengths and interests and dreams are, so we can make a good job match. And to be able to do any of these things that we're talking about, you really need to make a plan for cross-agency capacity. You have to say, do we have the capacity currently to do these things that Sean and Dale are talking about? And if not, how do we shift things around so people feel empowered to work with students and families in this particular way? So when it comes to reimagining families, like I said, I've been a family advocate for quite some time, and I have a younger brother with a developmental disability, and so as a sibling and as a family member, I've done a lot of work with systems and professionals and family members themselves to try to better understand why there still seems to be a disconnect between the professional world and the family world. And I think that's an important thing for us to address. And it's an important thing for us to try to strategize around, because if we improve our ability to partner with families, I believe we improve our ability to meet the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. But it's to take a look at maybe the way that traditionally we've looked at family engagement. And I realize that I'm painting with a pretty broad brush here, but traditionally professionals had seen families as not really involved in the transition process. I had heard a lot about how families tend to pull away in the middle and high school years, because the assumption is that, the school is taking care of a lot of things. And the new way to take a look at that would be that families are our partners, and we need to find ways to actually develop families as our partners so they can help us get the work done that we're trying to get done. Traditionally, families may have been seen as the problem. For example, they don't want to explore competitive employment for fear of safety or just assumption that their son or daughter can't work. And the new way to look at it is that families are people who have concerns. They have concerns over the vulnerability of their son or daughter. They have concerns over losing certain programs and benefits, and they just have questions. We need to address those questions head on and not avoid them. Uh, Traditionally, family engagement is not very well defined. So a lot of times professionals might be told, hey, we need to improve our engagement of families, but they're not given any real strategies or action plan or concepts to be able to do that. And what we advocate for is that you base it on the outcomes that you want to achieve. And Dale's going to talk about that a little bit later. So you have some kind of framework to define your family engagement efforts. And it's not just an abstract thing that you're trying to grab at. And finally, a lot of times families felt like they had no options, that they were given a pretty strict set of service options. Your son or daughter has a disability, this is where they go. And today, families are really looking for options based on individual needs. And the great news is that so are we, right? As professionals, as educators and vocational rehabilitation staff and employment program staff, we're all embracing this idea that individual programming, individual strengths and needs are the best way to go to help people reach the goals that they set for themselves. So specifically when we're talking about employment, though, we have to understand that families and caregivers play a huge role in helping young people develop skills and explore careers. Absolutely huge role. And think about your own upbringing. No matter how old you might be, chances are your mom, and you could point to something that your mom and dad or your caregiver did to help prepare you for adult life, to help prepare you to take responsibility, to help prepare you to do a good job when asked to, and to take work direction and to understand what it meant to be an employee. And the same holds true for students with disabilities. So we need to leverage that. We need to leverage what families can teach their young people and the role they play in the process. They can help us search for good job matches. They very much need to set or reinforce the expectation that competitive employment is what we're going for here. As sometimes I see families who kind of tap dance around the issue, and what we need to encourage them to do is say, no, when you're older, you're going to work, because that is the expectation. They contribute to the robustness of our assessments, so we can better understand the student and we can make good job matches. They can tap into their own personal networks, and they can help not only practice those soft skills that are needed on the job, but also teaching their son or daughters real things. How to navigate using a GPS, how to make a simple meal, how to use a wheelchair or assistive technology if that indeed is what they're using. So when we talk about engaging families in this process, it's much more than just informing families. It's not about giving them a form and saying, here's what we're doing, now you're informed and therefore engaged. But engaging families truly means that we're going to leverage all of their great energy and their influence on the student to be able to help us prepare and search in a real meaningful way. So I talked about defining through outcomes. I'm going to throw it back over to Dale, and he's going to talk a little bit more about that. Dale, we can't hear you.
Okay, how about now? Okay, good. So when it comes to engaging families, it's important that everybody is on the same page. And by that, I mean, not only the student and the family, but then of course, the team, the transition team that's working with them. And so what we're going to do, we started with in the last webinar, but we're going to continue with is this one, is kind of walk you through the process of what it takes to get work experience, what it takes to get a job, and then work that process along with and engage with the family as you go through that. So as you can see up on the screen, one of the first areas is improved assessment information. And I think it's safe to say that it's the family that knows this person the best, this student. And so when it comes to tasks that they do well, things that they like to do around the house, or if they have done any kind of volunteering, a lot of that really important information can come from the family and really provide a much better picture of what this person's possible vocational interests might be, along with what their capabilities and aptitudes are. And when it comes to, you hear it a lot, self-determination, person-centered planning, but one of the key ways that I think the family can play a role is that encouragement, that empowerment that can be given to a student so that they understand that this really is about what they want and that they shouldn't be looking to others to help determine what their job might be or what they might be good at. Help this person kind of be more in the forefront, kind of taking a direct role in providing information and leading that process that it takes for that person to work their way towards improvement. And that notion of word of mouth. This person is part of a family. They're part of an extended family. They're part of a network. They're part of a community. And in all those cases, who knows this person can really kind of help to get the word out in terms of what the person likes to do, along with what sort of opportunities that might be out there. And then that ultimately can lead to more and better quality job placements. So those are different ways that the outcomes that the student would be engaged in can be something that's done in participation with the family. And then these are the 3 steps that I referred to earlier: discovery and assessment, child development, and workplace supports. And I'd like all of you that are part of this webinar to think about your last few jobs. How did you get them? What was the process that you took to achieve the job that you're currently in? It had to have started with, what do I want to do? What's out there that I might like to be involved in? What areas of a specific type of job or career goal am I best at, where I can make the most and best contributions? And then ultimately that leads to the knock on the door, the looking up a job, applying for that job, interviewing for that job. And those are all part of a job development process that you might engage in on your own. The only difference here is we have additional staff and resources that can help with that outreach to the community, to those employers. But there's still an important role for families when all that's happening. And then ultimately, when a workplace work experience is achieved, or an employment opportunity is secured, then it requires those supports. And again, I think that's where the family comes in, knowing that person the best, and can work in concert to make sure that this person's properly supported to best ensure success on the job or within that work experience. So with that, in terms of the outcomes and the process, we're now going to get into the more of the details of this, and I'm going to turn it over to Sean.
I wanted to go back here for this slide just for a couple of things. One, a lot of the young people that you see pictured here, from what I understand, are students from Kentucky. I don't know their stories. I wish I did, but just wanted to acknowledge that these are young people in work and with their families, and I think that's great. And thanks to Patty and everybody at HDI for putting these great slides together. You know, when we talk about defining through outcomes, I also want to say that as a professional, you can take a look at your parent engagement through the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. For example, if you want to increase the number of work experiences that your program, your school program offers, that's a great lens upon which to take a look at family engagement. You know, you can say that we are going to engage families around this common goal of increasing the work experiences. That gives things some structure for you rather than have it be an abstract. And so all of these things on this slide are ways that you can look at engaging families, not just by, you know, what do families need, which is important, but also what do you need as a program, which is equally as important. So as we mentioned in webinar 1, if you were with us, Dale and I, along with Trina and Johnny and Jeff, had the privilege of being on site, actually physically boots on the ground in Kentucky. This was very late 2019 in the before times. Where we did pilot projects with Montgomery County schools and Franklin Simpson schools. And we piloted and modeled a lot of these things that we're talking about to help those 2 interagency teams improve their capacity to facilitate work experiences. One of the things that we did while we were on the ground there in Kentucky was we modeled the structured family interview. Now, the structured family interview is it's a strategy that we have devised, and it's not proprietary. It's not rocket science. What it is really an opportunity for you to set the tone with families and to gather information in such a way that is not assessment based and not compliance based, but more so an open and honest conversation about what families want their life, this life of their student to look like, and what is the role employment can play in that. So a well executed, respectful family interview can really accomplish a lot of things. First of all, it can solidify that family professional relationship because you're all combining towards a common goal. When you know that you're all working towards getting a work experience in the community, it brings people together. It helps the school program or the employment program set the expectation that employment in the community is the goal. Because like I said, a lot of times it seems like families would tiptoe around this idea. Do we want them in the community? Do we not want them in the community? And this is a webinar series about employment first. So yes, we want them in the community. And this is our way to set the expectation. It energizes families around that possibility, and it helps identify key roles and needed supports, not only the ways that families can contribute, but what needs to happen on all of the community partner side to help support this young person. And then finally, the end result should be that you've identified specific businesses or career areas to explore. Now, we did several of these interviews in both of those pilot sites, and every single time that you get a family together, it tends to be a very powerful experience. So I want to walk you through what you need to do to set up this interview, and then I'm going to show you the family interview form in hopes that you would consider doing some family interviews with some of the families of students that you're trying to find work experiences for. So the first thing to do to set up the interview is just to realize that this is not a compliance-based activity, right? You want to invite key contributors to the interview. And what I mean by that is people who are some way responsible for certain aspects of finding a work experiences for a student. Most likely the transition case manager, if you have a work experience coordinator, if you have a vocational rehabilitation counselor assigned to the school, or if you're working with a community rehabilitation employment provider, they should be there as well. It shouldn't be a big group. You shouldn't have 15, 20 people. You don't really want this to be a full-scale wrap meeting, but you do want the people at the table who can make some decisions and guide the process for the student. So even though this is called a structured family interview, this is very much student focused because the end result is a work experience for the student. But what you're doing with the interview is the things that I listed in the previous slide, which is gaining buy-in and getting information from the family. The interview itself should be no more than an hour, and it should be done at a time that works best for the family. And so that may mean that you're doing them at the beginning of the day. It may mean that you're doing them at lunch, may mean that you're doing them at the end of the day. I know that we're still working on this idea of working in non-traditional hours, but if you're in an employment program and you're able to do things on the weekends, you know, that might be a time to do it as well. And there should be at least one person there in terms of a professional that the family feels very comfortable with. It shouldn't be a group of people that the family is not familiar with or comfortable with, because that way you're not going to get you may not get all of the information that you're looking for to be able to conduct the interview. And the interviews themselves can be emotional. I'll tell you, when we're asking questions like, you know, what are you afraid of when you think about your son or daughter working in the community? You know that you're starting to tap into those things, but that's important because when families tell us what they're afraid of, they're telling us what they need. And also, so when they have people around them that they're comfortable with, they may feel a little bit better about opening up to be able to have these conversations. Now, it's important to take a look at this family interview concept and know that it's not designed to be your typical school meeting. And so I set this slide up to tell you the differences as I see it between a typical school meeting and what the structured family interview should look like. So, like it or not, a lot of typical school or employment program meetings, they tend to be compliance based, and that's fine because those programs have compliance measures that they're responsible for. But really, the family interview should be rooted in possibilities. It should be an open and honest conversation. There's usually a lot of jargon. Well, we'd like to replace that with intuitive questions. The things that we ask the families are of utmost importance. It should not feel like it's done in a time crunch, if humanly possible. It is not something where the voice of the professional should be paramount. You should view it as almost more of a focus group where there's one person leading the interview and asking the questions, and the voice of the families is really paramount. Now, you can ask follow-up questions and other people can contribute, but you want the families to feel comfortable and being able to talk as much as they need to. A lot of times typical school meetings are confusing for families, and this should not be confusing at all. It should be, we all want the same thing. Let's talk about how we get there. And the end result of a family interview is that a family should walk out energized and inspired at the idea that their son or daughter can work in the community. And this is something that we see time and time again when families walk away from the interviews. There's a little gleam in their eye that seems to say, hey, this is possible, and families appreciate it. Now, the questions that we ask, I'm going to show you the interview form here in just a second, but the questions that we ask when I show them to you, you're going to see that this is different than a typical school meeting. We always start with the question, what does a good life look like for your son or daughter? Think about your son or daughter in 5 to 10 years. What do you want their life to look like? And really, how do we get there? That's kind of the point, isn't it? What is your son or daughter's greatest skill or attribute? What is your greatest concern about transition and employment? Do they receive Social Security benefits? And if so, do you have any questions? What type of job do you think that they would be successful at? Do you have any contacts at local business that we could approach? Now, the Social Security benefit one is particularly interesting, where Dale and I were doing a session, a family interview in Michigan. And the mom kept on saying her daughter was going to work 10 hours a week. Her daughter was going to work 10 hours a week. And finally, I stopped the interview and I said, you've said 10 hours a week multiple times now. Can you tell me why do you think your daughter can only work 10 hours a week? And she says, well, my daughter gets Social Security benefits, and that's all that she's allowed to work. Now, we know that's not the case, right? We know that's not the case, but this is the information that this mom was working off of. And we were able to tell her, we don't think that's the case. We'd like to have you talk to a benefits counselor and get that cleared up, because we don't want families making bad decisions off of bad information. So real quickly here, because I see somebody had their hand raised, I just want to show you this form. And this is all that we do. We've got the form broken up into 3 sections. The first section, we talk about hopes and dreams and expectations and what a good life looks like and what their son or daughter's skills and attributes are. The second section, we talk about adult supports in school life. Do families feel supported? Have they been connected to resources already? Do they have any questions about that? This is where we ask about Social Security. And then in the final section, we focus on employment. And ultimately, we want to get to these final questions, which are, do you know any business owners that we could contact for potential work experiences? And are there any businesses that you have thought your son or daughter might like to work at? You could, and this should have been included in the information that you were sent. It's a very simple form, but it's just a great way for you to be able to keep track of the family interview and just make sure that you're getting the information that you need. So somebody had their hand raised. Let's see, or did I see that wrong? Okay, I saw a couple people. So I'm not sure if we can unmute them or if you need to type your questions in the chat box, or if there's a question and answer box that we could do too. I would put your questions in the question and answer box if you have your hand raised, and we be sure to get to those questions. So what I want to do then, there we go. So I want to throw this back to Dale because, as you can see, the family interview is all about gathering information from families, right? So what do we do with that information to be able to help with the process of facilitating work experience? That's where I'm going to throw it back to Dale, and he's going to discuss that.
Can you guys hear me okay? All right, do I still have that problem? You guys hear? How about now? Can you hear?
Dale, we can hear you.
Okay, good. So what do we do with the information? And also, Michelle, I don't know what happened there for you, but also use the chat box. And all of you, if you have any questions, please put that in there, or even a situation that you have, maybe where you've had some struggles, or even a success story. Any of those things, we would love to hear kind of what your thoughts are based on particularly the family engagement that we're talking about today. But what do we do with the information? So again, I talked about those three areas of what we all do to get a job: discover and assess, and then develop that job, and then get the supports we need. So this information can all be used in those regards, and all the information that we get from families as it relates to their son or daughter, that's grist for the mill in terms of our ability to do the kind of work that we need to do. So we could brainstorm different situations, and I'll go through that in a little bit more specific ways, particularly using those Venn diagrams. Because if we are talking about a person that has a disability, particularly a significant disability, the actual jobs that we think about, those job descriptions, may not be as applicable. So we need to think more creatively. We need to think, kind of brainstorm about what different ways that we can think about their interests, their abilities in relation to the labor market that's out there in the local communities that you all are part of. So with this next slide, we're going to talk about those Venn diagrams. And so what that entails is, if you can picture three circles that all intersect, and we'll show you one in just a minute. And what you can do is you can put into each one of those circles a separate kind of characteristic, or a passion, or a preferred environment, or skill, or a previous work experience that they had, or if there's a specific requirement that the person has in terms of maybe where the job is, or the possibility, maybe the person's such that they wouldn't do well if they had to interact with the customers. So we need a job that might be in the back, so that their interactions with customers may not be as readily part of their job. So any one of those factors can kind of all go into these Venn diagrams. And so what you do is then look at the intersections of those different factors, what they might like to do, what kind of environment that's best for them. And then what that should help you do is think about the kind of potential jobs that are available for that particular person. So let's look at one, which will be the next slide. And here's a profile on Jeffrey. Very outgoing, good sense of humor, loves to help others, interact with those folks. So, I think interacting with customers for Jeff would probably be a plus. Loves sports, been involved as a weightlifter with Special Olympics, very health conscious, loves to work out, and has belonged to a gym for a really long time. Also, his interests aren't one-dimensional. Likes music and music theater, likes to go to different plays, particularly the local productions in his community. Has experiences in different areas, both cleaning, stocking, sterilizing, folding towels. Has abilities to read and write simple phrases and can match when it comes to numbers. Doesn't like to use computers, but does use his phone for YouTube and that sort of thing. chores was laundry, walking the dog, vacuuming. And then he also has an interest in his heritage and the fact that he's half Jewish and has started to explore that culture. So these are all what might seem like random observations and information that's part of his discovery and assessment process. So if you take any one of those different factors and put those into those different bubbles, one, we're looking for Jeff for something with a social environment, more of a people kind of job. Tasks that we know he likes to do is cleaning and assembly. And he also loves sports and working out. So I'm going to stop there and just ask anybody on the webinar in the chat box, what comes to mind for you when you think about somebody with that? Where is that bullseye for you? What kind of job might there be? Okay, YMCA. Thank you, Donna. The gym. Yep. Okay. Thank you, Patty. What other thoughts might you have? Working in a sporting goods. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good. And so but the other thing we want to kind of get across here is that there's another possibility. So let's look at another slide. And what you can see here is where those things intersected is pretty along the lines of what some of you have said. Now, what's really interesting is you can continue to play with this. If you were to get a group of people together and you're kind of doing some brainstorming with some of the information that you already have, then you could also look at, he mentioned music. So you could put music in where the sporting was, and you could say, likes to interact with people, can do collating and different kinds of tasks that are associated with that. Well, then you might come up with another set of ideas for different jobs that Jeff can do. But here you have where those intersected was looking at the health club. And again, he had a relationship at that health club because he was a member. And so these are the different tasks that he was able to do at that as part of the maintenance team during what for Equinox, the health club was during their morning rush. And so here's a way to take advantage of his interests, his abilities, kinds of jobs that he was looking for, and address a business need, which was that morning rush at the health club.
Hey, Dale.
Yes.
David asked, how do you choose what to put in each circle or how to prioritize the interests and strengths? And so I think he's maybe looking for a little guidance on any strategies to be able to start with the right things instead of having to try.
Yeah, good. Well, I guess I'd answer that two ways. Is you can narrow it down. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you're going to do that, start with where's his prominent interests? Where does he have the greatest interest, and where might he be able to make the greatest contributions? Either one of those would be a criteria in terms of selecting certain items for certain circles. The other, which we've seen also work effectively, is just do different combinations of factors, both interests, environment, types of tasks that they like to do, because each one may lead you to a different kind of job that you otherwise wouldn't have thought about. But I think that's a great question, and thank you for that, David. All right, so next slide.
I think it's going back to me.
Yeah, take it away, Sean.
Thank you. I want to say about the Venn diagrams too, what a great thing that you can assign to families. And you can say, hey, tinker around with this. And also too, for families, what it does is it illustrates that the possibilities are out there. You're using that specific person's strengths and interests, and you're showing the family, boom, there is a bullseye here, and we can find it. Great tool. I love the Venn diagrams. Now, as an education or employment professional, you may have run into families who are apprehensive about the idea of their son or daughter working in the community. And it doesn't make them bad parents. It doesn't make them difficult. It just means that they've got questions. Remember what we said in the beginning. And there's a lot of reasons for that apprehension. And I think that it's up to us to view our jobs, or one of the pieces of our jobs, as helping families work through that apprehension so they can get to a place where they can embrace competitive employment a little bit better. Some strategies to work through that apprehension, and we've done larger sessions on this too. But I think that first and foremost, building relationships is number one. Families work better with those who they trust. And if they have a trusting relationship with you, and you're saying that work in the community is the best option, it's what the student wants, and we're going to be able to do it safely, they'll be able to trust that you're telling the truth there. Starting small is another one. Never jump fully into the pool without the parents' blessing, but start small and say, hey, would you mind if we just tried this job, and I'll be right there. He'll have supervision, but we just want to try it, right? We're just exploring the idea of employment. We're not throwing a person into a job without fully understanding what's going to make them successful and safe. Benefits counseling is also big. If your program does not have a connection to a CWIC, which is a certified work incentives counselor, or a work incentives planning and assistance person, I would strongly suggest you find out who does that in your region, because answering questions about benefits can really help families understand that 9 times out of 10 and even more, working is going to yield more money than not working, even if they're on Social Security benefits. So I just wanted to point out a few of those strategies for working through apprehension, because I just don't want the process to stop when a family goes, oh, this makes me scared, or I'm not interested. You may have to take your time. It may take a little time for families to embrace it, but it's up to us to be able to help families work through some of those strategies. Another great thing that I love in engaging families is this student vision statement. Now, I don't know if Stephanie is on the line today, but Andy, her son, is on the left, and this is his vision statement. And the URL is for a free customizable vision statement template that the Kentucky Works is offering. And so this is just a great way to help families see their son or daughter in a different way. So if you are a school or an employment program staff and you want to do something really interesting with the student, help them put together a vision statement with pictures and in their own words, and then show it to the family. And I guarantee you that the family will absolutely love it. And it also doubles as a resume, which is a really nice thing. So I would just encourage you to go and try a vision statement with your students or your job seekers, because it's a really fun exercise. Another exercise to do is this charting the life course trajectory, and it's very simple. It's got the 2 boxes on the right. What is your vision for a good life, and what don't you want for a life? And then have the families work through this. And the way that this trajectory works is that you have an arrow pointing from the lower left to the upper right. So anything that the family is currently doing to promote the vision for a good life, it goes on top of the arrow. And anything the family might be doing that's leading us away from that vision, it goes on the bottom of the arrow. Very simple tool, but it helps families see that sometimes the things that we're doing that we think are helpful are not always helpful in reaching the goals that we set. So I love this. And then the URL is down in the bottom. It's lifecoursetools.com. All of these things are free, wonderful tools to be able to work with families. And so Dale's gonna finish us off here by talking a little bit about how it all comes together in a planning process.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. I want to stop too and just say that we do, and remind you, we have these coaching calls that will take place. Our next one will be exactly 1 week from today, the 24th, at this same time, 4 p.m. Eastern. And strongly encourage you to, if you were here with the last webinar, we provided you with the positive personal profile. It's a 1-page assessment tool, all positive information about the youth. We also shared this features to benefits form, which kind of narrows down the information. all that is really good information that you can use for those Venn diagrams. And now you've got this tool, which is a family interview. So strongly encourage you to kind of play with these tools, work with them on behalf of an individual and maybe even a family. And consider trying to gather some of this information and then get on the coaching call with us next week and share kind of how it went and what you learned or any questions that you had. Or if you just want to look over these tools and get some more guidance on how to use them, we'd love to have you join us for those coaching calls. And so as Sean mentioned, the information from the positive personal profile, the features to benefits form, and from the family interview, all that can get put onto what we call in this job development plan. And what that does is it kind of narrows it down and asks the basic questions. Given what we now know about this student, where might be some good employers to contact on behalf of this specific student? And what you can do is call together some people, the family, the youth themselves, any other professionals that are part of your team, and kind of patch that all together for a job development plan meeting. And so we're running out of time, so I'm just going to wrap it up by showing you on the next slide what that job development plan looks like. And you can kind of see different information from the positive personal profile, or the interview goes there. And then right below that is a way that you can kind of brainstorm, well, what businesses should we contact on behalf of specific specific youth? Which employer should we contact to explore a work experience? And with that, I'll turn it back over to Johnny to wrap it up.
Well, thanks, Sean and Dale. And I know we are quickly running out of time, and we're going to respect your time and be very sensitive to the top of the hour here in just a moment. So we'll finish up on time. We did want to point to several resources that we've included in this PowerPoint presentation, and you can access this at the link that was earlier in the chat box for today's materials. And really good information there that we think you'll find useful. Thanks for some of you letting us know that there was one or two resources that did not make it into the folder for today. Just know that we will get those in the folder and out in an email to you in a follow-up email to this webinar. So you can expect that at the latest tomorrow. So we will get those to you. I want to ask for sort of one more opportunity. If folks have time for, you do have time for another quick question, or Sean or Dale, any last words before I close us out today?
I would just say, Johnny, that I would strongly encourage people to visit us in the coaching call next week if you have any questions, but also if you want to try a family interview, and then you could come to the coaching call and tell us how it went, or at any time you can do that as well. It's just our opportunity to dig deeper, but we really thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks. And looking forward to that. That is next week. In the email that you'll receive from us, there will be instructions on how to register for that coaching call, as well as the final webinar on employer engagement in 2 weeks. Brandon has put in the chat box the link to the evaluation. We encourage you to fill that out, please. And Brandon, if you would, please repost the link to the materials. And I think it's in the chat box, but it's way up. So if you wouldn't mind to repost that. And just as we close today, thanks so much for your time. You know, as we think about and continue working on, and again, nobody's doing that more than you from where you lead, but as we continue working to improve outcomes and employment outcomes specifically for students with disabilities, there is no more critical voice and no more critical role than that of parents and families. So I think as we continue the good work of effectively engaging them, it's going to mean that we have richer conversations, and it's going to mean that we have better plans, and that increases the potential for students to be successful. So thank you all very much, and have a wonderful day. Stay safe.